Hey y'all, it's Brian here from Going Commando. Before we get to this week's episode, I want to tell you about Anchor.fm. Now, Anchor.fm is how we distribute this very podcast, Going Commando. And when we were starting the show, James and I did a lot of research to try to figure out the best way to get this podcast out into the world, and Anchor.fm was the clear winner. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. First of all, it's absolutely free. Second of all, there are creation tools within the website that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more platforms. You can also make money from your podcast, which is what we're doing right now, with no minimum listenership. It is everything you need to make a podcast in one place. It could not be simpler. Anybody can do it. If I can do it, certainly you can too. So, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Jingle bell, jingle bell, jingle bell rock. Jingle bells swing and jingle bells ring. Snowing and blowing bushels of fun. Now the jingle hop has begun. Jingle bell, jingle bell, jingle bell rock. Jingle bells chime in jingle bell time. Dancing and prancing in Jingle Bell Square. In the frosty air, what a bright time. It's the right time to rock the night away. Jingle bell time is a swell time to go gliding in the one-horse sleigh. Giddy up, jingle horse, pick up your feet.
Folks, welcome to episode 4 of Going Commando, the only podcast about 80s and 90s action movies in the known universe. The known universe being, of course, confined to this podcast, as far as I'm concerned. My name is Brian Yancey. With me, as always, is my co-host who has been driving since he was an inch in your daddy's pants, James McDonald. How are you, sir?
I'm good, my friend. I'm good. It's good to see you. Good to talk to you.
Good to see you as well.
I'm a little jealous of your new camera. You look, I don't know, you look almost professional.
I gotta say, man, I gotta do something about the lighting situation in here because I look like a fucking zombie on my end. I got these like bags under my eyes. I didn't shave today. I haven't really been shaving very much in quarantine just because I'm not really going anywhere. And if I am going anywhere, I'm wearing a mask, so nobody's really seeing my face. Pre-COVID, I probably shaved my face every single day, or at least every other day. And now I'm like maybe once a week, maybe less frequently than once a week. So I look like a hot mess, but I'm in HD. I'm an HD hot mess.
Yeah, you're like a 4K ultra hot mess almost.
And I've got this lamp here because the overhead light is entirely too yellow, but this is also too yellow. But that one up there is like way worse, which is why it looks pitch black behind me.
Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, this is a not a visual medium, so it's a good thing that we're getting this all out of the way right at the top.
Yeah, we're gonna have to really work on this in case it does at some point become a visual media as well, and people are like, "Oh, fuck me, this is what we've been listening to."
Yeah. So anyway, yes, I have a new camera. You can check me out on Onlyfans, Chatterbait, ManyVids. What are the other ones? There's a few other ones that I'll join eventually, but those are the big ones, I guess. And you can find me there. That's my new line of work, probably.
Oh,
the way things are trending.
You should drop your OnlyFans tag so they.
Onlyfans.com/silverfox42069.
Awesome. I've been thinking about making that too. I'm gonna call it Honey Bear.
Honey Bear.
Honey, I have to figure out a number because I'm sure there's a lot of honey bears on there.
There might be, yeah. Maybe we should just make like a joint one for the podcast, right? Instead of a Patreon, we have an OnlyFans. We're the first podcast OnlyFans. We don't have to be nude. Lots of people have OnlyFans and don't do sex work. They do other things.
That's true.
But we could, eventually maybe pivot to that if we feel like we need to.
Well, if the podcast doesn't take off and we need more money, I mean...
Well, how else are we going to pay for these fancy cameras, these fancy microphones, this hosting platform, recording platform? We've got to raise some capital for this thing.
Well, I've been trying to hold off, but I guess, it's off to gay porn for me.
hey, I support you, man. Whatever you want to do, I support you, and I will.
I've
I
been
will
told by
subscribe.
my fiance. I've been told by my fiance that I'm a fairly high catch in the gay world. Like apparently, fat burly guys are a thing.
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah,
no
I mean,
idea.
everybody's got something that they're into, you know. And
Right. It's funny. She told me that.
Go ahead.
She told me that. I was like, man, all these years I've been trying to get like, hot women to like swoon over me. If I only knew that I could get hot gay guys, man, I've been in the wrong market.
yeah, it might be a lot easier. I mean, maybe not. Obviously, there's probably certain things that come with it that, maybe don't come out of a heterosexual relationship. But it's like anything else. You take the good with the bad, you make the best of it.
True. Well, you do what you can, right?
Yeah. So anyway, onlyfans.com/goingcommandopod. Just kidding. But we do have social media. If you want to follow us on there, we're Going Commando Pod on Twitter and Instagram. You can email the show as well, goingcommandopod@gmail.com. And let's get the show on the road. What are we talking about today, sir?
Oh man, we're gonna do our Christmas specials.
Yes.
There's really only two real well-known Christmas action movies that I can think of from the 80s. And we're going to leave my favorite for last, so we won't talk about that right now.
Mm-hmm.
But today, we're going to do the first Lethal Weapon movie, because it's definitely a Christmas movie.
Lethal Weapon, 1987. And it's funny you bring that up, because this is always a big debate that I see on social media. It's usually not Lethal Weapon that's brought up. It's usually Die Hard. Is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
Yes.
Okay. I think I agree.
And
but
I will argue. I'll give you my arguments when we do the next podcast. Spoiler alert: Die Hard is the next movie we're doing. I argue it all the time, and I think I have a really good argument for why it's 100% a Christmas movie.
Well, you'll have to listen to the next episode for that. A lot to get into here today about 1987 Lethal Weapon. This, I think, is, you have what you might call tentpole movies in certain genres. I would consider this one a tentpole action movie.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, people say this. I think it might be the buddy cop movie.
Yeah.
It's definitely not the first buddy cop movie, but it's probably the most well-known and most successful buddy cop movie ever.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I don't think it's actually on our list, but I think the first buddy cop movie that I really ever have like a good memory of watching is 48 Hours with Eddie Murphy and Nick Nolte. That must have been like 4 or 5 years before Lethal Weapon, probably.
Yeah, I think the first one was like 1985 or 84 or something like that. Kind of like at the height of Eddie Murphy's, well, not the height, but definitely like where he started to come up.
Yeah, he was on his way up. Yeah.
He was definitely on his way up. And Nick Nolte wasn't on his way down yet. So there's that. But I think you're right. I think it did definitely come before this. But Lethal Weapon, I think, is the ultimate buddy cop movie. You're going to be really hard-pressed to, make me disagree with that.
Yeah, so to that end, I mean, Lethal Weapon centers on really the relationship between Riggs and Murtaugh. Riggs played by Mel Gibson, Murtaugh played by Danny Glover. And it's established pretty quickly that these two LAPD cops are very different. They have very different philosophies, very different lives. And that plays into and creates conflict throughout the movie. Well, not entirely throughout the movie, but it kind of sets up, the eventual kind of like friendship that tends to blossom towards the end of the movie or throughout the movie. So it's an interesting, to your point about buddy cop movies, that's usually the way they're structured. And it can be somewhat predictable, but I think that, again, to your point, this is probably the best distillation, the purest distillation of a buddy cop movie that I've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really think of one that really sticks out as being a better buddy cop movie. There's lots of movies where you see two partners and they have really good chemistry, but I don't think any of them spawned 3 sequels and spanned, almost 20 years of movies, essentially. Probably would have been 20 years had Mel Gibson not had his implosion.
Yeah.
Just something we're going to talk about.
Yeah, we'll get into that. But
there was talks, I think, of a Lethal Weapon 5 for sure. And it just never got made after, he kind of went off the rails.
I mean, I guess it's not too late. I mean, some would say that his public image has been somewhat rehabilitated in recent years versus what it was in like the early 2000s, say.
Oh, absolutely. And I think I would agree with that. I've seen a couple of his movies that he's done since, all that went down. Probably the most notable thing I can think of is he did a movie.
Daddy's Home 2?
What's that?
Daddy's Home 2?
I actually did see that. I did see that, and I thought it was really interesting. He's definitely pretty good in the movie as far as his character. It's exactly what you would think old Mel Gibson would be in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But no, he did The Expendables 3, which wasn't bad.
Right.
I think where they went wrong there is they went to a rated PG-13 rating, hoping they would garner more fans, more views. And the movie just didn't have the backbone to carry it.
No.
So that was, I think that was a failure. He also did one called, I want to say it's called Sins of the Father or something of that nature. I'll look it up real quick. But he played like this tattoo artist, ex-con, whose daughter comes looking for him for safety when she gets in with some bad people. And it actually wasn't bad. I watched it a couple years ago. It's got his daughter's played by Aaron Moriarty, who plays in The Boys. I don't know if you watched The Boys.
I have not seen The Boys yet.
It's called Bloodfather. That's it.
Bloodfather.
Yeah, it's not bad. It came out in 2016, and he plays this badass old dude. He definitely pulls off badass old dude for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
When do you want to do? When do you want to talk about the implosion? Do you want to save it, or do you want to talk about it now?
Well, you brought it up. I had it saved in the outline until the end, but we can talk about it now for sure.
Let's save it. Let's go over the movie, and then I'll tell you about my thoughts about the implosion. But it's
okay.
Sorry, I was kind of getting ahead of myself. You got to reel me back in sometimes.
I'll do my best, man. I'll do my best. So yeah, let's we just we discussed the movie a little bit there briefly, but why don't you tell me a little bit about your personal history with this movie, Lethal Weapon?
It's funny. I never saw the first one initially. First Lethal Weapon I ever saw was actually Lethal Weapon 3.
Oh, yeah.
I think
that's sorry, not to cut you off, but I was going to say that's a very one of the most probably famous movie scenes that was ever filmed in Central Florida, where we grew up. Was that opening scene in Lethal Weapon 3 was filmed in downtown Orlando.
Wasn't that the was it the courthouse or?
I think so. Yeah, I think it was the old courthouse. And then if you go downtown now, they built a brand new one, or it's not brand new at this point, but it's still relatively new. But I remember being like 8 years old, and that was like a huge deal on the news, like top story on the news when that was happening. But anyway, go ahead.
But no, basically that's really it. Like that's the first one I ever saw was Lethal Weapon 3. I don't know how old I was when I actually finally watched the first Lethal Weapon, probably like 12 or 13. And I just remember thinking, like, this is a really great movie. Why have I never seen this movie before? It was rated R, I think, when it came out, but it really wasn't all that bad. I mean, especially, looking at movies now, that movie's very, very tame. Yeah, I mean,
there's female nudity in like the first female and male nudity in like the first 5 minutes of the movie, which probably didn't help the rating. there's drug use. There's drug use immediately. There's like a self-thwarted suicide attempt. So I could personally understand the R rating, I guess. I don't know.
Oh no, I understand it. I'm just saying, like, by today's standards,
sure.
It's kind of relatively tame, except for the nudity, I guess. That's really the only thing I think that would still, push it into an R rating for sure. Otherwise, the rest of the subject material is stuff that you see on regular everyday cable. Now
that is true. It's kind of crazy to think about what TV was like when we were kids, or at least what I was exposed to, versus what it is now, where you can just turn on like TNT at like 2 p.m. and just see like dudes getting mowed down, like bloody, getting their heads shot, all
Oh
kinds
yeah.
of terrible, grisly shit, just in the middle of the day. But if there's a single female nipple anywhere in that movie, it's going to be edited out. We're not allowed to see that. But a guy's head getting blown off, sure, that's fine. Makes all the
Yeah,
sense in the
absolutely.
world.
Yeah, of course, of course. To that end, though, I think that's really my first experience with it. Really, is just watching it when I was a little bit older. I don't even remember when or where I watched it, but I remember like I really liked the movie. I don't even know how many times I've seen it since then. I probably it's not my most watched action movie, but when I was watching, I was like, I really don't need to be watching this again. I know every aspect of the movie, which I think is a problem we're going to have with a lot of these, but I don't tire of watching it, so it's fine.
No, I mean it's it's again it's a tentpole of the genre. It's super well done, and when it comes to movies like this, I think that as far as their legacy is concerned, decades after they've been released, like really the litmus test is how rewatchable is it? Is it it's because these types of movies are meant to be watched over and over again. It's not like a serious
Oh, yeah.
Oscar bait motion picture where you see it once, maybe you enjoy it or you're affected by it in some way, but you never feel like you have to watch it ever again. This, on the other hand, is one of those movies where, and this speaks to my own personal experience with it, is that it's just you're flipping channels, you see it's on HBO, doesn't matter what part you're coming in at, but you just stop what you're doing and watch the rest of it. And I think that's the ultimate mark of a good action movie, and an action movie that has staying power.
Agreed. So, I mean, is that basically your experience with it as far as like where you remember watching it from, or?
More or less, yeah, just like kind of catching bits and pieces of it on TV. I do distinctly remember when I was a really, really young kid, my parents had a bookshelf full of VHS tapes of movies that they had taped off of TV, which is like such an antiquated thing to think about now. But we had a bunch of those, and there would usually be like 2 or 3 movies on each tape, and we pretty much never watched them for whatever reason, but they were just there. And I sometimes I would just like sit there and read like the labels, like whatever like my mom wrote down on the label. I could always recognize it was her handwriting. I could recognize her handwriting. And Lethal Weapon was definitely one of the ones I remember reading. So at some point in my parents' life, they liked that movie so much that they taped it off TV onto a VCR tape, a VHS tape, and it was in my house pretty much until I was like 20.
Yeah, I mean, well, again, it's a good movie, and it's definitely a tentpole movie. It ticks all the boxes, I think, as far as what a buddy cop action movie should be.
Yeah,
I think it really kind of set the bar.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and again, to your point, it's a Christmas movie because we get Jingle Bell Rock right in the opening credits there. It's very quickly established that it's Christmas time in Los Angeles.
Right. And I think I read somewhere in an article that Richard Donner wanted it to be a Christmas movie.
Yeah.
People were like, oh, you can't make this a Christmas movie. It's a bloody, violent action movie. And he basically told the studio, okay, fine, I won't do that. But it's a Christmas movie through and through. And He starts out with Jingle Bell Rock. And the last scene of the movie, they're going in for Christmas dinner. And there's Christmas lights, and the Murtaughs are rebuilding their home. It's a Christmas movie. And it has a lot of things that you see in a Christmas movie. You have a protagonist who's got some kind of struggle that they need to get over.
Mm-hmm.
And by the end of the movie, they find a redemption arc. And Riggs definitely finds that. He's grieving the loss of his wife in the movie.
Yes.
Contemplates suicide at least 2 or 3 times in the movie, but finds, a friend in Murtaugh that kind of helps pull him out of that depression, and it kind of makes him realize, he's going to go on and things will be okay. That's really a good sentiment for a Christmas. I mean, when you think of Christmas, what do people think of?
It's a Wonderful Life. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm not talking about. I do. I think of It's a Wonderful Life, but I mean, I think of like friends and family and people coming together and having that connection, and that movie's got that. I mean,
absolutely.
It takes a weird roundabout circle to get to it, but it definitely gets to it.
I totally agree, and I think you put it perfectly. And it's not really, I guess I hadn't really thought about it in that kind of deeper sense, but when you put it like that, it really does have, Riggs's arc in this movie, to your point, is, a very Christmas movie arc for a character in a movie to have. That's a good point. But here's my question, and this is somewhat unrelated. How would you feel if you were sitting in your bathtub on your 50th birthday and your grown children and your wife surprised you while you were naked in the tub with a birthday cake?
I don't know. You gotta also understand they're not grown children.
Well, they're grown enough. Let's say that.
The oldest one's grown. The other two are still pretty young at this point. I don't know, man. It's kind of a weird scene, but again, think of it this way: it was a different time.
It was a different time.
It was not uncommon to see a scene where, especially the father figure, not with the mother. Like, you never saw this with the mother, but you would see like a father figure in a bathtub, and people would come in and talk to him.
Yeah,
it wasn't quite uncommon. I mean, it wasn't like this super excessively used scene, but I definitely know that I saw it in other movies and television shows. Probably in one like the Waltons or something like that. Grandpa or
sure.
Mr. Walton's bathing, and one of the kids coming in to talk to him. So I'm sure that it didn't seem out of place then, but in the world that we have living today, it seems weird and out of place. For sure.
It's I mean what I will say about the scene is that as jarring as it is to watch in 2020, it does do a good job, as do the subsequent scenes, of establishing, the stark difference in lives between Murtaugh and Riggs. Murtaugh is this family man. He's got this beautiful family, a nice house. He's got a boat. He's like a happy guy. He's got a lot of love in his life. And I just think about when I was watching the scene the other night, the first thing that came to mind was that scene in Ferris Bueller's Day Off when Ferris like pretends to be Sloane's father and like gets her out of school for the day, and you see the dean watching them, and she comes out and like embraces like they're like it's father daughter, and then they just start making out, and the dean is like, well, I guess that's how they do it in their family. That's what I thought of. Even though there's like nothing sexual whatsoever about this bathtub scene at all, for whatever reason, that's where my mind went. So that's how my brain works.
It's a weird scene. I often think in the back of my head, like, not so weird, I guess, for the oldest daughter, because it's kind of hinted at that she's probably a senior in high school, definitely in high school. She knows what's going on down there, I'm sure. But like his little daughter comes in there too, and she looks like she's maybe 6, 7 years old. So that seems a little weird. I think it might. You don't really see Murtaugh from the chest up. So maybe it's kind of implied that like he had like a washcloth over himself, or there was bubbles in there you couldn't see. I don't know. Like, you don't see enough of it. So it does come across as really weird though, and a little jarring. For sure.
I think more than anything, I don't like being like scared or surprised in that way. This just happened to me this afternoon, actually. I was downstairs cleaning the kitchen. I had my headphones on, the same headphones you see now. They are noise canceling headphones. So if they're on and I'm listening to music, I can't hear anything else that's going on. And Megan came up behind me and just like frightened the shit out of me. And then she started laughing at me for being so scared. And I was like actually upset for like 10 seconds, and then I got over it. But I wasn't in the tub. But if I had been, I don't think I would have been a happy camper personally. But at any rate, you get this nice establishment of Murtaugh as this loving family man, loving father, loving husband. And then we see Riggs in his camper on the beach, gets up, he's naked, grabs a beer, like very stark differences. He's by himself. He's got nobody. He's grieving the death of his wife, as we established earlier.
It is a really weird contrast because you're right. Like, Riggs is laying naked in his trailer. He wakes up, obviously looking a little rough, probably hungover for sure. Walks across the trailer naked. The doors are open.
Yeah.
He grabs a beer out of the fridge and drinks some of it, and then he's sitting there, urinating and gurgling beer like mouthwash. And it really shows the difference between a guy who's got everything in his life put together and probably everything that Riggs's character was waiting for in life, but kind of got taken away from him. And you kind of get some of that sentiment later on when they're talking. Riggs says, you have a real nice family there. And he's, kind of happy about it, and giving the compliment. You kind of gather that maybe he was a little, maybe slightly envious of Murtaugh's position a little bit at that point in time.
Yeah, a little bit, but he still played it very close to the vest. He didn't let his feelings really be known one way or another. He's very guarded, I would say, at least early on.
Right. Well, and I mean, part of that is also you got to think of the archetype for the character he's playing. He's this real badass cop, former special forces soldier. You really never find out what kind of special forces he is. Yeah. So I'd kind of be interested to know what kind of branch of the military he was in. But the dude's a real badass. He plays that character very spot on for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so. I totally agree. I mean, for all of his misgivings in recent years, it's really perfect casting in hindsight for both of them. I think the movie doesn't work without them.
No, it doesn't. You know what's funny? You talk about the casting. So this movie came out in 1987.
Yes,
and Bruce Willis wasn't a big star yet. His star didn't come till the next year.
He was known as a TV guy. He was doing moonlighting at that time.
Right. I didn't know this. Do you know he was up for the role of Riggs?
I did see that on the little IMDb trivia page.
I guess when Mel Gibson showed interest, they basically just threw Bruce Willis away. But can you imagine the difference in contrast between the two?
Yeah, it's interesting to think about that alternate universe. But I mean, what I will say is that there is definitely a lot of similarities between John McClane and Marty Riggs.
There's quite a few for sure, and we'll actually talk. I'll touch more on that on the next podcast because I got a lot to say about Die Hard. I've argued Die Hard is a Christmas movie for years, so I can definitely make that argument. It would be an interesting contrast to see how Bruce Willis would have interacted with Danny Glover. I don't know that it would have been as special as, say, Bruce Willis with Samuel L. Jackson in Die Hard 3.
Mm-hmm.
But it would have been interesting to see. It's funny, Richard Donner, I watched a thing today where he actually, when they were casting Murtaugh, and the casting director suggested Danny Glover, he was like, and this is Richard Donner, who's known as being a pretty liberal person in Hollywood, very left-leaning. He didn't picture Murtaugh as being a black guy.
Oh.
So when it was come up in a casting suggestion, he was like, I like the guy, but he's a black guy. And which is weird, right? It's weird to think about.
It's a weird thing to say to someone.
It is, but what they were talking about in there is that generically, when they would describe an older cop character back in the the 80s, it was generally perceived that this older, established, real down to earth, grounded family man character was going to be played by a white guy.
Yeah.
That's just kind of the way it was in Hollywood back in the 80s. So when somebody suggested Danny Glover, Richard Donner just couldn't see it at all.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Can you imagine anybody else in that role of Murtaugh?
No, he's perfect. I mean, he checks all the boxes. He can play, the family man perfectly. He can play the action cop hero perfectly. It's I can't think of another actor of any race other than him, really. I mean, obviously, it's kind of hard to imagine just the movie being what it is and him being in it and being so good in it. But yeah, it's a perfect casting choice.
It is. I think it's a really perfect casting choice. I can't think of anybody else who would have been good in that role. I think some of the people, from what I heard or remember watching this video earlier today, Nick Nolte was up for the role. It's funny we mentioned Nick Nolte earlier. He was up for the role, and at one point, oh God, help me out here. The guy who was in Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Christopher Lloyd? Dom DeLuise?
No, not Oh shit! Why can't it come to me?
Bob Hoskins.
That's it. Somebody out there is listening to this right now, yelling, going, "Bob Hoskins, you dick!"
I always get him confused with Dom DeLuise for some reason. That's just like a weird brain tick that I had. Sorry about that, everybody. They're very different, obviously.
Very different. But yeah, apparently he was like Donner's first choice for playing Detective Murtaugh, which I can't see it for the life of me. I can't see it. I don't understand.
No, I think we would have had a Back to the Future situation on our hands had that happened. They would have started filming the movie and then fired him. Well, maybe not, but
it's possible. I mean, I can't. He's Bob Hoskins was a great actor, and I think he could have definitely played the role. I don't think the magic would have been there.
No, you don't get the same, and it's not just because it's one white guy, one black guy, but you just wouldn't get the same. I think just relationship, the same contrast in characters and acting work, because for as different as Murtaugh and Riggs the characters are, Mel Gibson and Danny Glover also have very different acting styles,
right?
But two acting styles that complement each other very well, in my opinion. And I could see someone like a Bob Hoskins, with all due respect, playing a character like Murtaugh, maybe a little bit more down the middle, let's say, and a little more maybe not more similar to Riggs, but just not as different, I guess.
Exactly, and to go a little further of what you said there, I can't imagine anybody else taking the role of Riggs, really. I mean, I'm sure there was other actors who probably would have been good at the role. Some names that were up for it, obviously, Bruce Willis. I think somebody said at one point Stallone was attached to possibly playing the role.
Yeah.
There's some others. The way that Mel Gibson plays the role, he's got this really lovely mix of like funny and charismatic, but complete unhinged psychopath.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's why everybody thought that he was just, working for his psycho pension, as they said in the movie.
Right, exactly. And his scenes where he gets really intense are just really, really amazing. Like the picture I texted you the other day when I was watching it. That's the scene where they're jumping off the roof.
Every single day I wake up and I think of a reason not to do it. Every single day. And you know why I don't do it? This is going to make you laugh. You know why I don't do it? The job. Doing the job. Now that's the reason.
You want to die?
I'm not afraid of it. I ain't afraid of it.
Here, take my gun. Don't nibble on the barrel. Pull the trigger. Go ahead, pal. Be my guest. Go ahead if you're serious.
You shouldn't tempt me, man.
Put it in your mouth. Bullet might go through your ear and not kill you.
Yeah, under the chin.
Yeah, under the chin. Ow! You're not trying to draw a psycho pension. You really are crazy.
I'm hungry. I'm gonna go and get something to eat.
Oh, God.
But the look in his face in that shot is just pure craziness.
It's the look of a man who is not afraid to die.
Right. It's completely unhinged, a complete loose cannon, and it's perfect. He's perfect for the role. And as the character evolves later on in sequels, he seems to know just how to pull it back enough in every subsequent movie to make it like a very believable character arc. And I don't know, I'm sure that has a lot to do with the writing, and they were like, okay, well, you're calmer this time. But he also, in all the subsequent movies, knows how to turn it to crazy just enough to where it's believable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's expertly played, and again, like I can't think of another actor who was around and kind of like of note in that era that could have played that role so well. And going back to our point about Bob Hoskins, it's hard for me to imagine. For some reason, I'm thinking about the scene where Murtaugh and Riggs first meet in the office, and Riggs is kind of like leaning up against the desk. Murtaugh's in his office over here, and Riggs pulls out his gun. This is before they know who each other are. But, Murtaugh's like, oh, he's got a gun, and he tackles Riggs, and the one guy's like, oh, meet your new partner. Like, I couldn't imagine Bob Hoskins making that tackle.
Well, you should really note here that he attempts to tackle Riggs. He doesn't actually tackle Riggs.
Yeah.
He runs at him, and Riggs pulls a really good hip toss on him and puts him firmly on the ground with a boot on him and a gun in his face. And it really establishes right away, again, that Riggs is pretty much a badass.
Yeah.
Even though that was established in the scene prior, two scenes prior, when he was buying Coke from the guys in the Christmas tree lot, which I think is it's a great scene.
It is a great scene because I think one reason the scene works so well is because if you're going into this movie blind, knowing nothing about the plot, about the characters, Mel Gibson does such a great job of just like sinking into this undercover role. I totally bought it, to be honest with you. I haven't seen this movie in a very long time, and I just thought I knew he was crazy in this movie, right? And I just figured, he's buying Coke because he's like out of his mind, and like this is like a real thing that he's doing. It's not like that he's undercover and trying to, bust these guys. So it fooled me. Maybe I'm stupid, but it fooled me, and I could see how it would fool other people too. And that's one reason it's so great.
You want it all?
Yep.
He wants it all.
He wants it all. Beautiful.
All right, congratulations.
Maybe a nice 6-footer to put it under, huh?
You want a tree?
Yeah.
I'll tell you what. I'll give you the best tree I got in the lot for nothing.
Hey, thanks.
But the shit's gonna cost you, 100.
What, that much?
Hey, you said you liked it? That's a fair price.
Yeah. Yeah, hell, you only live once. Get this together here. 20, 40, 60, 70, 25.
Hey, what the
Hey,
man.
85, 90.
Hey.
Come on, shut up, man. I'm losing count. 93, 94, 95, 96.
Forget it, you dumb shit. 100,000. $100,000. Did you hear what he said?
100,000? I'm sorry, I can't afford that, not on my salary. But look, I'll tell you what, I got a better idea. Here, let me say I take the whole stash off your hands for free. And you assholes can go to jail.
Hey,
what do you say about
wait a-
that? Now I can read you guys your rights, but now you guys already know what your rights are, don't you?
This badge ain't real. You ain't real.
Oh, you sure are a crazy son of a bitch.
You think I'm crazy?
Yeah.
Are you calling me crazy? You think I'm crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to see crazy? I'll tell you. Now that's a real badge. I'm a real cop, and this is a real fucking gun.
As much as it's kind of hard, you with his past, you don't want to heap too much praise on Mel Gibson.
No.
But, he's a really excellent actor. People forget that he's a really good actor, and he does really good at showing a large range of emotions. In his career now, he's kind of known, people don't really remember that, after that, he did some pretty serious roles.
Yeah.
He played William Wallace. He did that movie, The Patriot, which I don't know if you've seen that movie. That's an excellent movie.
It's up there. Yeah. I mean, that's one. That's another one that was just like kind of on like HBO or something, just like all the time, like when I was a teenager.
Yeah. I remember watching that movie with my friend Matt at my house. We were in high school, and we were probably in like 9th or 10th grade. And we hadn't had anything to eat yet. I think we both sat down with like a bowl of cereal and just ate like a box of cereal and watched the paper. Which is weird, what the weird things you do when you're a kid. But
yeah,
he was a great actor, or is a great actor. He's still really good. But just to watch him in that movie and the way he plays that character, I think is just expertly done.
Yeah, I totally agree. Again, not to heap too much praise onto him for. But credit where credit's due. I mean, it's a perfectly played part by him. Again, like the movie wouldn't be the same without him or Danny Glover.
No, I agreed. And it's funny, just to get into little bits of the movie. So there's a really weird part where when he goes to Murtaugh's house the first time, after they've had their first day together and they're having dinner, and Murtaugh's oldest daughter, Rayanne, is, she's fallen head over for Mel Gibson. Now,
Right.
she's supposed to be a high school girl. It's really weird, though, the contrast of how people age. She's only 4 years younger than Mel Gibson, the actress that plays her.
Yeah. It is interesting how Hollywood can play those tricks, isn't it?
It is. I didn't realize this until I was looking it up the other day. He was born in 1956. She was born in 1960. So
Right. she was 27.
She was 27 when the role when she did the role. He was only 31.
Yeah.
Not very old at all. But I think when I was watching the role as a kid, I remember thinking like, oh, that guy's like at least 40. It's weird. Like
He's supposed to be he's supposed to be 38. His character is 38 years old in the movie. And I will say, going back to kind of the opening scene where we see him in his camper, he looks like super old. Not like super old, but like older than he is, I think.
Yeah.
Just like in his face. He's wallowing. It's part of the character for sure. But yeah, I mean, he looks 38. He doesn't look 31. I'll say that.
No, he doesn't. But it's weird to think he was like 31 years old. Like, I think I mean, if you start doing the math on that, when he did Mad Max, the original Mad Max was, I think, come out in 1978 or 79.
Yeah, 78, I think.
He's like 22 years old when he started in that role. He looked like he was easily like a 30-year-old man at the time.
Yeah, I guess we all age differently. I don't know. I mean, he was a heartthrob in his day for sure, but I don't know. I think I might be aging better than Mel Gibson has. I think you are too, actually.
I appreciate that.
At least in our faces, we both still have very youthful faces. I think.
I don't feel like I'm aging as gracefully as Mel Gibson, but I'll tell you one thing I was really surprised in is when that dude, like even at 60, when he goes to the gym and tries to get in shape. Now I'm sure there's probably some testosterone, maybe even some HGH going on in there because I mean, if you can afford it, why not? Do you remember seeing him in the Expendables 3? God, that guy was jacked.
Yeah, I mean, again, like. I'm not saying it's not impressive, but when you're a famous, rich actor and it's your job to bulk up for these movies, and you have the ability to spend 4 hours a day, 6 days a week at the gym, whatever it is, whatever it takes, it's a far cry from a regular asshole like me or you coming home after a long days of work, of thankless work, and then trying to like go to the gym for 4 hours. So the standards are different. I'm not saying it's not impressive, but it's his job. So I get it.
And again, I mentioned it. I'm sure it's not completely natural. I mean, when he did the Expendables 2, he was, I don't know, in his mid-50s at the time, probably. I don't know when the Expendables 2 came out, 2014, 2015, I can't remember. So
I don't know.
Yeah, it was like, well, the first one came out in 2010. So sometime between 2010 and 2014, because it was out before I met Danny.
Yeah.
So he'd have been like in his mid-50s, 57 or something like that. So I'm sure he was, taking a little bit of the needle. But
yeah, probably the cream and the clear, as they say.
Right. There's nothing wrong with that, dude. Do you, man?
It's your body.
Well, the thing is, man, and I don't want to get too much off topic here. There's a lot of research now that kind of shows that, a lot of the things that we heard when we were kids in the 80s and 90s about like steroids is going to wreck your body and destroy this and destroy that was kind of bullshit in a lot of ways. It's probably not as harmful to your body, especially if you're doing it with a needle, as like drinking alcohol, to be honest. But, we were always told in the 80s, like, just, doing steroids will make you angry and, make your nuts shrink and make you a douchebag.
Oh yeah, that was the big one. There was always a stigma attached to it. That's for sure. I think it probably just goes along with, again, it being the 80s. To your point, there was just such a strong crusade against kids trying drugs when we were kids.
Right.
It was like something that. Go ahead.
I was gonna say it was definitely against kids doing drugs because up until like late 90s, early 2000s. People were totally okay with pro athletes doing drugs as long as they didn't get caught.
It's true. Yeah.
Do you remember the summer of the dingers when we were in with McGuire and Sosa going bat for bat to see who could crack the record?
Yeah, the summer of 1998, and this was coming, I believe, 4 years after the big MLB player strike that canceled the World Series, and baseball hadn't really quote unquote come back in popularity until McGuire and Sosa were just socking home run after home run that entire summer, and suddenly everybody loved baseball again, and it was fine until it came out that they were probably both doing lots of steroids. Yeah, juice to the gills. It's interesting how the people's perception can change based on those sorts of facts. They enjoy it in the moment and almost have like a childlike innocence about it. They're naive, and then the facts come out and they're like, oh, that's terrible. They cheated. They're cheaters. It's like, I mean, I guess technically, if they broke the rules, they're cheaters. But you watched every single game. You enjoyed it. You were entertained by it. They weren't hurting anybody. So, not to be like a fucking libertarian about it, but like, why do you care?
Yeah, and see, well, that's kind of my argument for that too. Is I feel like, people only really care if somebody's doing drugs like steroids if they get caught doing steroids. If they get away with it, people don't give a shit. Even if they know, they don't really care.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the thing is, people don't realize this. I mean, baseball's clean now for the most part, I'm sure. Although I'm sure there's some guys out there that are beating it. Football seems to be fairly clean, but you're never gonna be able to make it completely clean, because the minute they figure out how to test for something, there's somebody out there figuring out how to hide it.
Right.
It's like I watched a podcast with Joe Rogan, and I can't remember this guy's name, Jeff something another. He's the president of USADA, which is the athlete training, like the testing commission that tests all like the UFC fighters and stuff. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about how like they find a way to test for something, and then immediately they have to go and look for a way to test for the next thing. He's like, it's never ending. You catch one fighter doing something, and you figured out how they do it. And then as you're starting to implement that, they've already figured out 2 other ways to get around the test. So you're never going to clean that up. Like, those things are going to be there. So what do you do?
I mean, what most people do is feign moral outrage over millionaire athletes who are under immense amounts of pressure to perform and produce, who are sometimes, not forced, but they feel obligated to do everything in their power that they can to obtain some sort of competitive advantage over, their competition. And that's something that you and I and that person who's feigning that moral outrage will never be able to understand, that amount of pressure. Like, you could try to put yourself in their shoes, but you'll just never understand it. And again, like, there's no need for the outrage, because it's a totally different world. Like, we don't live on the same planet as they do. It's just different.
I remember when I can't remember the year. Do you remember the year when the Miami Hurricanes, the football team, college team, when they won the national championship? It was like in the 90s. They won it like a couple years in a row there. They were so hot. Like, they were bigger than the Dolphins down in Miami.
Oh, yeah.
I remember listening to it was like a interview or something, and they were talking about how steroids were so rampant back in college football at that time. One of the players was like, man, when I was in high school, he's like, I used to have college recruiters throwing steroids and hookers through my window.
Yeah, I believe it.
So, I like I said, again, I don't know that you're ever going to get rid of it. I think what they should really do to make it more fair is just figure out a way to regulate it.
Yeah.
Because you're never going to get rid of it. Regulate it.
Yeah. The fallacy of the quote-unquote student athlete continues. Am I right?
I agree. But we got off on a crazy topic there.
That's all right. Yeah, we're hanging out. It's a hangout podcast.
Right.
Speaking of which, just like a very quick sidebar, because I don't know if you saw the news today, but the HBO Max is releasing, was it Universal, I think? Like all the movies that are coming out that were, what was that? Warner Brothers. Yeah, that's right. Warner Brothers is releasing all of their movies slated for next year They'll be in theaters, but because of the pandemic, they're also going to be on HBO Max, like pretty much on the same day as they're in theaters. And it got me thinking about just the idea of like going to see a movie and how much I would love to be able to do that right now at a movie theater.
Yep, me too, buddy. Me too. We talk about this. I think you and I have talked about it several times, and me and Danny talk about it weekly. About how much we miss going out and seeing people and doing things.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. Like things I didn't used to really care about doing before. Like I would love to go sit down in a restaurant.
Yeah, sure.
Just have dinner in a restaurant. So hopefully, we'll start releasing these vaccines soon, and maybe getting back to some type of normal semblance of life pre-COVID. But getting back to your question, I did see that, and I think it's a good move by Warner Brothers. I saw somebody post about how, and this person who posted this, I'm not going to name drop. Let's just say that she's in entertainment. She's a friend of Danny's, and she does producing in Hollywood on some. I think right now she's stuck in reality show limbo, but she's tried to get into movies and stuff. And she posted a thing about how she thought this was the beginning of the end, and I kind of disagree. I think that once COVID is over, people are going to flock to theaters in droves.
Yeah.
Once COVID is over and we get the clear all for people to go back out and start resuming normal lives, I feel like you're going to see this massive wave of people taking vacations and spending money. It's going to be a big surge for the economy, and people are just going to lose their damn minds for a couple months, I think.
No, I think you're right. And I did see a lot of talk about that too, about like, oh, this is the end of like, if not like the end of like the independent kind of like art house movie theater. Like I think those will be there no matter what, because they have a dedicated audience that will come back to them, time and time again. But a lot of people are saying that, oh, this is the end of the big like multiplex chain movie theater that's like in a suburb attached to a mall, that type of thing. And I agree with you. I think that people are like tired of the pandemic, and I get it. We're all tired of it. We're tired of sitting at home and not having anything to do. And, to your point, I think that people are going to want to go out and do stuff, even if it's stuff that they maybe didn't do very often pre-COVID. It's going to be there's as long as people have the money and the income to do it, and that's another question entirely with everybody losing their jobs. Yeah, I think I would pay a lot of money to sit inside a movie theater right now and just watch a movie that I don't even like that much. Maybe like it doesn't even matter what it is.
Yeah, well, so would I. Like, I know right now, I want to say it's AMC, because the theaters are open down here. I don't know if they're open where you are, but they are open here. They're not getting a ton of revenue, I'm sure.
No.
But I know that AMC and places that are open now are offering this deal for people who want to come in and see a movie, but who might be nervous about COVID, where you come in and for like, I want to say it was like $100, which I thought was super reasonable. You can rent the theater out for like a group of up to 20 people to watch 2 movies. Okay, so you get together a small group of friends who maybe all go get tested the day before and hang out in a theater, of an isolated group of people that you all know. You can still social distance in there. And,
of course.
And watch 2 movies. And apparently, from what I understand, it was going to be any movies you wanted. Like, as long as they had licensing to show it, they were going to show it. So if you wanted to go in there and watch, something crazy like Texas Chainsaw Massacre or something like that, as long as they had the licensing, they were going to digitally download it and show it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting idea.
It is, and I think it shows a lot of ways how the theaters are hurting right now. Like, would they have considered doing that this time last year? No fucking way.
No, absolutely not.
But now they, hey, $100 to let 20 people come in and watch, 4 hours of movies. We'll take it.
Yeah. You gotta take whatever you can get, I guess, unfortunately.
Absolutely. I don't think it's a bad idea for Warner Brothers. A lot of people are like, well, Warner Brothers is going to lose all this movie on ticket sales. And they're not. I think what a lot of people don't realize is like movie studios like Warner Brothers, Universal, Sony, they don't personally finance the movies. They take loans out to finance these movies, and they have to pay those loans back. This is something I didn't know until recently. So say, it costs them $200 million to make a movie. They've got a loan for $200 million. the terms of their loan and interest doesn't get, held over until the movie can be released, they got to start paying that back whenever the contract is due. So
Right.
you take, like, let's just say Marvel Studios, for instance, like last year, if they would have had to hold back Endgame, I mean, what did Endgame cost to make? $500 million probably?
It was expensive, yeah.
So you're talking about loans on $500 million. If they'd have had to hold that back 6 months or a year, like all the extra money they would have had to pay in interest, that just cuts in the profit.
It does,
So,
yeah.
I don't blame Warner Brothers at all. Like if I was with Warner Brothers, I'd be like, well, shit, how can we get some tarps and set up screens in empty parking lots? Like, what can we do to make this work?
Yeah. Yeah, the movie theater parking lots are big enough, Set them up in there.
Yeah, I mean, they have to do something,
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think that I agree. It's a good idea for Warner Brothers to be doing, but I think for most people, myself included, sitting, even if you have like a nice large TV, good sound, whatever, it's pretty much impossible to replicate the experience of watching a movie inside a theater surrounded by people you don't know with sitting at home on your couch and watching it. It's just not the same.
Oh, no, you can't. There's no way to replicate that feeling and the experience of going to a movie theater. I don't. That's why when this person posted about how she thought maybe this was the beginning of the end, I was like, I doubt it. I really, really doubt it. Yeah. I feel like, especially at this point, people are so ready to just get back out into the world that, once that opens up even just a little bit more, people are going to start wanting to take some chances. I mean, we see it down here because we're not as closed off as like you guys are in PA and some other states.
Yeah.
I'll drive down through downtown because one of the things that we do a lot now is just drive. We'll go out and get in the car and just drive for like an hour, 2 hours, just rolling around wasting gas. But
it's a great pastime. It's one that you and I did quite often back in the day.
It is. It absolutely.
That was like our primary hobby, I think.
Yeah, for a long time, just drive around and waste gas, burn tires, destroy transmissions, whatever else we broke. But I drive through downtown Melbourne, and there's people going out. They're just taking the risk, and I mean, while part of me is like, oh, that's so stupid, and what are you doing? And part of me is like, I fucking get it. I totally get it.
Yeah, it's really hard to know what the right thing to do is sometimes when it comes to that sort of thing. Because if you're, and again, like this could 99% of this I think can be chalked up to just like the complete failure of our government to respond to this pandemic. But as a result of that, there's just so much different information out there that people are free to take whatever they want from it or not take anything from it. And it's just hard to know what the right thing to do is sometimes. And I think people struggle with that. And I think that I understand it to a degree, especially at this point, 9 months into this thing.
Oh, I do too. And I feel like we're 9 months into it. I feel like, I mean, realistically, I feel like we could be looking at another 9 to 12 months. At least probably through the first half of next year, if we're lucky. But we could be into this until this time next year, really. I mean, and who knows? Like things may not ever go back to completely being normal.
It's going to be a long time if they do. Long time.
I mean, I hope they do. I'll be honest. I mean, I'm a nurse, and I hate to say this, but I hate wearing a mask. I absolutely hate it. I do because I'm a nurse and I understand what is at stake.
Yeah, they work. Masks work. Yeah,
but I fucking hate wearing one. I mean, like, I really do. Like, I can't even like lie and be like, oh, I love my mask. I fucking hate my mask. It's it's stuffy. Being a big guy with a beard, I feel like I get hot and overheated with it, and it's just uncomfortable. I mean, now I wear it. If I'm out in public, I wear it. If I pull up to a drive-through window, it's on when I'm in the drive-through window. But when I don't have to have it on, it's off me and in the console of the car. That's one thing I still don't understand. Like I see people driving all the time and they're wearing their mask while they're driving with their windows up. And I'm like, what are you doing?
Again, like, to the point I made earlier, it's there's just so much like disparate information out there about what the right thing to do is that I could totally understand a person who is by their nature an overly cautious person doing that sort of thing.
Oh yeah.
I gotta say, I don't mind wearing the mask. I didn't love it over the summer when it was hot up here. Just to your point, it just gets hot, it gets stuffy. But now that it's cold out, the mask is great. Keeps my face nice and warm and protected. I don't have like one thing that happens to my face in the winter here is like I get like these like red lines like right here, like on my cheeks, just from like cold wind hitting my face. And I'm not gonna get that this year. One, because I'm wearing a mask. Two, because I'm not really going outside ever. But it's one small benefit, I guess.
Well, yeah, and I mean, like we went out the other night and we had our first kind of cold snap here the other day. I woke up on Tuesday. Was it Tuesday morning? I think it was Tuesday morning. It was either Tuesday or Wednesday. I can't remember which. Anyways, it was like 37 degrees in my house. Mm-hmm. I woke up, I was like, Jesus, what the hell happened? And we went out that day and we went somewhere and I had to put on a mask. And I remember thinking, like, as I'm walking in this place, I'm like, this isn't bad. I mean, if it was like the 40s or 50s all the time, I could wear this thing.
Yeah, but in Florida, that's not the reality.
No, it's not the reality at all. And even down here, like right now, I mean, it's wintertime here. It's still humid. We're still getting rain, sure. Not every day, but, at least once or twice a week, we're still getting like hell, like last week we had a torrential downpour here for 3 days in a row. Like, we're in like November. What the fuck?
Right. Yeah, it's pretty weird. Climate change, bro. It's real.
Agreed.
As a sidebar to a sidebar, you brought up the Expendables, and then we talked about movie theaters. I gotta say, watching the Expendables in a movie theater, that's an experience I look back upon quite fondly.
Agreed. Did you and I go watch the Expendables?
No, I was living in Orlando at the time, and I went to the theater downtown by myself on it must have been a weekday afternoon, and I don't know if it's still there or not, but there was a movie theater in downtown Orlando that it was like kind of like the first wave of like these like more upscale, for lack of a better term, movie theaters with like reclining seats and cup holders and like things like that. It was one of those movie theaters, and I went there. I walked from my apartment, saw the Expendables, sat in a nice comfy chair, not too many people around me, but like enough people. And, just lost my mind at how ridiculous this movie was.
Yeah, I don't want to, off topic shoot on this too much, but I thought the Expendables was great when it come out. Yeah. It's a shame that they just started to go downhill after that. It seems like after the first one, they just had a really hard time trying to figure out how to keep that going. No, for sure. And make it work, which sucks. Because it was really good. I think had they kept them rated R and, I don't know if they didn't hype them enough. I don't know why they fell on their face. Because the first one was a huge success. And then the second one... I was
just going to say, I think it's just like, it's like almost any other movie series. It's like not like a comic book movie, right? Like not Marvel or DC. There's going to be diminishing returns with each subsequent movie for the most part. Both creatively and financially. You see it all the time. But you see it in Lethal Weapon,
That's true, but to that extent, like, then look at another franchise like John Wick. John Wick 3 made more money than the previous two movies, I think almost combined. And the second one made more money than the first. So,
I feel like that's the exception rather than the rule, because the first John Wick was like kind of like a surprise hit, I think. And then it ended up it kind of became like a cult film in some ways, even though it was a box office success, excuse me. So to that point, you would see a larger return on the second movie, the third movie. But for the most part, the first movie does great. And then it's good creatively, it's good financially. And then these movie studios think, okay, like how can we replicate this? And they never, for the most part, really get there.
It's hard. It's really hard. Yeah. And even comic book movies are really hard unless you do the right things. Like Marvel Marvel has, everybody likes to talk about Marvel's being the juggernaut, but even Marvel's made some really big mistakes. Like it took 3 Thor movies to figure out how to play that character.
Right.
The first one was okay. The second one was pretty shitty. I'll say that out loud too much. But the third one was great. I don't know if you saw Ragnarok. I'm sure you probably did.
I haven't seen it actually, but I've heard I've heard good things about it. I've heard that, to your point, it's kind of, I don't know if over the top is the right word, but they kind of took it a little bit less seriously. Am I wrong in saying that?
No, they did. They took it a lot less seriously, and they kind of let Chris Hemsworth play to his strengths, which, he can play a badass. But he does really good when he can play a badass with a little bit of a comedic streak. And he does it really well. And he made that character just fantastic. It's a shame that they couldn't figure that out like on the second one or the first one. They try to keep it a serious character, and it doesn't quite work. I'm not sure that I'm sure that somebody could play that role seriously and make it work. Chris Hemsworth just can't. He doesn't. Yeah. His strength is in comedy, kind of playing things a little goofy. Now, that being said, he did do a movie that released on Netflix earlier this year called Extraction, I think is the name of it. I don't know if have you seen it?
I have not seen it. I have not seen it, no.
Excellent movie. You should totally watch it. It feels like a 1980s action movie. Just better done. Think of like an Arnold Schwarzenegger, like hostage commando type movie, but just way more serious with way more realistic fight scenes and weapons. And that's what you got. It's an excellent movie.
That sounds up my alley. I'll have to check it out. I was just, trying to figure out something new to watch today. And maybe that's something I should add to my list here.
I would say definitely put it on your list. I won't spoil it for you, but I think they're talking about making a sequel. Not quite sure how they're going to do it, but I think it can be really good.
Nice. So, getting back to Lethal Weapon, there's a couple of other things that I want to talk about just very quickly. One, of course, being a scene that I think is... when I think of Lethal Weapon, I think of this scene, if not first, pretty close to first, and that is the electroshock water torture scene.
Okay.
With Mel Gibson and Endo.
Okay.
Your thoughts?
I think when I saw that movie, that was the first time I'd seen anything. No, I want to take that back. I was about to say I think it was the first time I'd seen anything like that, and it's not. But I think that movie did it better than the movie I saw. Okay. So the electric shock treatment. I saw that done the first time, I think, in Tango and Cash.
Oh, Tango and Cash. That's a movie we got to do on this the show at some point.
We should. But I saw it the first time, I think, in that. And that's the first time I've seen the electric shock treatment. I think Lethal Weapon did it better. I think the way they did it was better. I think like where they set the scene was better. It makes more sense. Yeah. Tango and Cash did it. They're in prison and they're lowering them down into these like big vats of water. And you're like, okay, how would somebody get away with this in prison? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But here, they're in a hallway of some like scummy back building, that's attached to a club somewhere, and there's a shower there. All pretty believable. I think it's a good scene. And again, it's really the only thing that's there is just to reiterate how much of a badass Mel Gibson's character is.
It's a really intense scene because, at this point, so the bad guys have captured Danny Glover, Murtaugh's daughter, have kidnapped her, and Riggs and Murtaugh are going after the guys to get her back. And again, credit where it's due. Mel Gibson, he plays it perfectly. And, I really like, Endo talking to Joshua, who is played by Gary Busey, who we haven't really brought up yet, saying like, oh, well, he doesn't know. He doesn't know anything because nobody can take that. I was like, all right, this guy's a badass. I'm impressed.
It's a good scene. And it really goes, like, they kind of make Danny Glover's character look like a badass too, because while Mel Gibson's getting shock treatment, there's a guy in there who's just using Danny Glover's face as a punching bag.
Yeah, and he's already been shot in the shoulder prior to this.
Right.
At the big desert standoff scene.
Right. And, and he's not telling him anything. He's just being hard as a nail. And then they take salt I don't know if you noticed that, like, the guy pours a bunch of salt in his hand and, like, crams it into his shoulder wound. Like,
man, that's gotta hurt.
Here's one of the fallacies of movies. Even to this day, like, Danny Glover probably would have lost that arm. Good possibility he would have lost that arm.
Oh, yeah, for sure, absolutely.
but plot armor. You need him to have his arm for the sequel.
Exactly, plot armor.
So, it's just a great scene all around. You love Gary Busey's character, and the scene that pops into my head whenever I think of the movie. My first scene that pops into my head, and I don't know why, is the scene in the nightclub where they're making the drug deal with the guy. And, And he asks the guy if he has a lighter, and he pulls his lighter out and asks Gary Busey's character to, like, hold his arm up and sticks the lighter underneath his arm and just kind of sits there and burns his arm for who knows how long. I mean, it seemed like
a long time.
It was probably only like 15 or 20 seconds. It seems like a minute or two. And he's just sitting there making that face like, he's like getting burnt. And they're all, obviously they're trying to establish what kind of a badass, the bad guy is.
Sure.
How mean is he? And I think, in all honesty, I think they couldn't have picked a better person to play Joshua. It's funny, I read an interview that was done with Gary Busey. This was back in like the mid-90s or late 90s. And he was talking about how he got in the best shape of his life to play that role. Because I don't know if you remember this or not. Prior to that, Gary Busey's career was like really quickly like following the toilet. He was
for sure.
He was definitely circling the drain, as it were. And he, I guess, apparently had shown some interest in the part. And one of the casting directors said, "You're not what we're looking for. You're out of shape. You don't look the part. You're not very menacing. You're known for playing a drunk. You're just not our guy." So This was like a year out from or 6 months out from the casting. He went and hired a personal trainer and started getting in shape. And when he came in to do the audition, he bleached his hair completely blonde and had it slicked back and walked in. And they said that like everybody was just amazed at how good he looked and how like he fit the part. And he tried to play it just like stone cold. And I think he was perfect for the role. I mean, we all know at this point Gary Busey is batshit crazy.
Yeah, and I would say that craziness has enhanced, you might say, some of his roles. Whether that's intentional or not is anybody's guess, but he has a certain intensity that a lot of other actors don't have, and it's natural.
Right. And that role really kind of gave his career a shot of life. Whereas probably if he had carried on the way he was, we probably wouldn't know who Gary Busey is. Well, people would, but like he wouldn't be a well-known name. Like had he not done that when somebody mentioned Gary Busey, we probably would have been like, "Oh, the guy who played the uncle in Silver Bullet, right?"
The guy who played Buddy Holly.
Right.
That's what he would have been.
Right. Stuff like that. Like you wouldn't have thought of Lethal Weapon and the first Under Siege movie or Predator 2 or Point Break.
Yeah.
All roles he played a really cool character in. We wouldn't have had he not kind of like kicked himself in the ass and pulled himself up and tried to like show what he had.
To your point about Joshua, I wanted to bring this up too, is the final fight scene between Joshua and Riggs in Murtaugh's yard. Maybe the most for a movie that, as far as 80s action movies go, I think has been like, it's still been wildly illogical, but compared to a lot of stuff I've seen, everything that happens within the universe of the movie has, for the most part, made sense, right? It moves the plot along.
Right.
This fight scene towards the end of the movie does not make any sense. It does not serve. It serves very little other than to have a cool fight scene in the movie where Riggs and Joshua are, having their little jujitsu contest over what looks like rain, but it's actually a burst fire hydrant in Murtaugh's front yard, surrounded by cops who could, if this were real life, just, like shoot Joshua, arrest him, whatever.
Well, and again, to your point on that, it doesn't make a ton of sense.
Come on, Rick! Break his neck! Come on! Come on! Let me take him! No! Please! No! Back up!
It does feel like here's the thing, though. They did write it well enough that it's shoehorned in there in a way that it doesn't feel like it's grotesquely out of the the vein of the movie. But
it's a great fight scene. But at this point, the movie's over more or less, and they're surrounded by cops. And Joshua's just by himself.
Well, I think there was a little bit of a lot of stuff going on. From what I understand, they wanted to. The original idea was to arrest Joshua's character. That's what Richard Donner wanted, and then make him somehow maybe, if they got greenlit for a sequel, maybe write his character in later. And,
I see.
And Gary Busey essentially said, like, I'll walk off the set right now if my character's not killed off. Like, I want his character to be killed off. Why he would want his character to be killed off, I don't know, but I think that might have been a stroke of genius in his brain that, the main bad guy should die. And he's kind of right. Like, the main bad guy really kind of needs to go in a movie. But, very seldom do you get a bad guy who makes it onto a sequel and it makes sense. I can think of a lot of the Marvel villains who arc over multiple movies, that makes sense. But, their story was built in the comics. But then you take somebody like maybe Mr. Smith in The Matrix. He's a good, villain to be kind of an overarching villain in the movies. But when he was originally written, I don't think the Wachowskis wrote him to be like that. He was supposed to be like he was supposed to die. Like the scene where he dies, that's supposed to be it. So when we went and rewrote the sequel, somebody got the idea, I guess, to bring him back. I guess probably a lot because Hugo Weaving's character is, he's just such a great actor, and the character comes across as very menacing. So, but otherwise, very few villains make it past the movie they're in.
Yeah, and interestingly, it did for a second seem like that Joshua would live to fight another day because, and it's funny, it's like kind of like a nice contrast of Riggs and Murtaugh's established characters throughout the previous hour and a half, whatever it was, because they're having this fight and Murtaugh's out for blood, even though he's not in the fight. He's like yelling at Riggs to kill Joshua, and Riggs decides, even though throughout the rest of the movie it's kind of been established that Riggs is a lot less measured when it comes to discharging his weapon, use of force, that sort of thing, than Murtaugh might be. This time the roles are reversed. And Riggs decides not to kill him initially, until he gets up and steals a gun from a police officer, and then they both just shoot him, and then he's dead.
Agreed. And first and foremost, a second to this, those two officers should be fired.
Listen, man, two of their coworkers had just been murdered, like 30 seconds prior, a few minutes prior, whatever it was. But yes, to your point. Keep going.
I'm just saying, they had him in handcuffs, man. Like, how does a guy take down two grown men and pull a pistol out of one of their holsters? Like, come on. But it's again, I think this having the fight scene there, having the movie end that way, I don't know if it was completely meant to be like that from the beginning, or whether maybe they kind of shoehorn that part of it in there. I don't really know. I think it works really good for the movie, and I think because it's one of the most iconic endings to an action movie like that, the way it ends, I think they did it right. The fight scene, though, again, and this is kind of the weird thing about fight scenes in movies in the 80s and 90s versus now. The fight scene was really kind of over the top, didn't make a ton of sense. And there was some really bad jiu-jitsu in there.
Very bad, yeah. Some bad... what was that, like a rear naked choke? Or, I I don't know what kind of like the triangle choke that he's in.
Oh,
I don't know what it's actually.
That's a triangle choke. That's you got that.
Okay, all right.
That's a triangle choke, and he did it correctly, like the rap. But what he didn't do is then he like pulled him down and he like stretched himself out. Like I don't know if you saw that weird thing he did where his arms were out to the side, like like that's not the way you would reach up and grab that person's head with both hands and try to just hold them as close as possible. That's the way that is locked in. I'm sure there's probably some like Brazilian jiu-jitsu guys who are watching that movie and crying.
But then I'm sure that I only know it was a triangle choke because the Undertaker did a triangle choke for a few years as one of his finishers.
Yeah.
The Hell's Gate is what he called it, and it was probably pretty similar to a movie triangle choke, like the one in Lethal Weapon.
Yeah, I mean, it looks cool, and might be one of the only times I've ever seen a Brazilian jiu-jitsu move done in a 80s action movie. John Wick does a lot of jiu-jitsu and stuff like that, and they've kind of invented his own fight style. Like actually, they call it. I'm gonna screw this up. I want to say they call it gun fu.
Okay.
Because he uses the gun a lot.
Sure.
The gun is involved in his fight, almost like it's just an extension of his fist. So fight scenes have gotten way more realistic since the 1980s. Go back and look at like the 50s and 60s, like the old westerns.
Sure.
Fight scenes keep evolving. One thing I do kind of like about action movies, though, sometimes the fight scenes are not comic book action movies, is the fight scenes are over the top sometimes. They're a lot less believable. But I do like a really good grounded in reality fight scene where you look at it and you're like, yeah, I can see that happening.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it just depends on the tone of the movie that it's in. If it's an over the top movie to begin with, then yes, an over the top fight scene is, you wouldn't watch like a comic, like an over the top comic book movie, and if there's like some kind of like very like gritty kind of realistic looking fight scene, it wouldn't fit, and vice versa, I think. So
agreed.
Yeah, I mean, as kind of like ridiculous and like needless to the plot as it is, it's a great fight scene, very entertaining.
Oh, I agree. There's a couple fight scenes in the movie, not a lot, but that might be. I mean, it's obviously the longest. It's the best fight scene in the movie. It's not too over the top, and it's not too unrealistic to make it completely unbelievable. So it passes. I mean, if I was going to grade it as like far as movie fight scenes, it gets a solid B+.
That's a passing grade, man. It's not quite graduating with honors, but it's close enough, in my opinion.
Agreed.
So, with that in mind, shall we give it our rating?
Yeah, let's give it a rating.
Okay. Lethal Weapon, like I said at the top of the show, I think it's a tentpole of the genre. I'm going to give it 4.5 fists.
Okay.
There's not much about this movie that I think could be improved upon. But, is it a perfect movie? No, it's not perfect, but for this genre, this era, perfect casting, entertaining writing, entertaining set pieces, lots of good dialogue between Murtaugh and Riggs. Like iconic dialogue. I'm too old for this shit. That's a movie line that has been in the lexicon for 30 years.
Yeah.
That's not something you see every day. So 4.5 fists.
I think that's a pretty stellar rating. I'm going to go a little bit further. Like you said, it's a tentpole of the genre. I think when you look at a buddy cop movie, it should really be the picture that comes up in the dictionary, because I can't think of a better example of a well done buddy cop movie. Casting is great. The story's good. There's only a little bit of things that I would probably change in it. One of them might be how much that Riggs kind of talks himself up a little bit in the movie in places. It comes across as a little arrogant, a little over the top. You kind of think of a grieving guy may not come across quite that way. So that might not be the best thing for his character to have been written to do. But I'm going to give it a 5. I think it's a 5 fist movie for me. I think that's my 5 fister here.
I think it is. First 5-fister. We're fisting away down here, and 5 of them is as high as it goes.
Yeah, there's 9.5 fists in here.
nine and a half fists out of a possible 10 fists.
No, I just again, just to reiterate, I think you're right that being a tentpole movie and how good it is and how quotable it is, how many times it's been copied and referenced.
Oh yes, very influential movie for sure.
I feel like even though there's things it could have done better, I feel like it's got to have a 5-fist rating.
Yeah. So with that in mind, let's talk about Mel Gibson and his personal struggles.
Okay.
So, this is something that I feel like we have to address because we would not be, and we texted about this, we would not be good podcast journalists if we didn't bring this up. A big reason for Mel Gibson's career decline, say like after, I guess like the late 90s, early 2000s, that era, was self-inflicted in a lot of ways. He's had alcohol abuse issues. He considers himself a, quote, ultra-conservative religious person. That has kind of come back to bite him in many ways, in the sense of, there's really no other way to say it. He's been caught on tape saying like very mean, very hateful, very anti-Semitic things about other people. He claims he's manic depressive, and I think I believe him, but I don't know if that's just because I want to believe him because I like so many of his movies, or if I shouldn't believe him and I should think that. And this is not me like trying to put a stigma on mental illness. I believe that mental illness and manic depression is very real, but I think for celebrities who are sometimes just assholes, it can be an easy way out for them. Am I wrong in thinking that? Am I crazy? Am I the asshole?
No, I don't think you're wrong in thinking that. I think a lot of celebrities who fuck up, and really screw the pooch in some situations will pull the mental card. It's pretty easy. You see it outside of celebrities. I see people who will do something pretty bad and they'll be like, well, I have bipolar. I'm bipolar. Well, yeah, but you were on your meds when you said what you said or did what you did. You're just being an asshole. I think some people definitely, especially if they're diagnosed, sometimes will put that card in their back pocket and just kind of save it as a trump card, like a get out of jail free card. Like if they say something or do something really shitty and offend somebody or make somebody mad, they can be like, hold on, let me get the card out. It's not me, it's my mental illness.
Yeah.
And like you said, you want to give as much good faith to that as you possibly can. But there's a point where you got to be like, well, but you might just be an asshole.
You might just be an asshole, or you might not be getting the help that you need necessarily. Living your best life, And I don't want to say that, again, we talked about this to a certain degree with like athletes and steroids earlier, but like we're never going to know what it's like to be a celebrity, to be under pressure as a famous person and have to live that life. It seems fucking terrible, to be honest with you, to constantly be under the microscope, and that can affect us, a person's mental state for sure. And not everybody handles it as well as other people do. But at a certain point, and more specifically with Mel Gibson, I think that there was definitely things he could have done differently, for sure.
Oh yeah, I think that's just a given. Like you really can't argue, that he couldn't have done things a lot better. I'm kind of like you. I don't know whether I want to just, give the guy a little bit of leeway because I like his movies so much. But I feel like his, in recent years, his actions of like the last, I don't know, decade, because it's over a decade ago now that he had his really public implosion, let's call it. That was back in like 2000. Yeah. 2008, 2009. So we're going over a decade now. I feel like in at least the last 5 to 8 of those years, he's really kind of tried to go out of his way to apologize and try to, I don't know if he's acting or if it's, genuine, but he seems like he's trying to be a better person. Now, we don't know him personally. I don't want to give the guy a pass. But I will say this. We live in a world right now where if you fuck up, it doesn't matter, how good of a person you are pre and post fuck up. The world we live in now, like when you do something bad, like you can't live it down. And
you're canceled.
Yeah, you're canceled. And I'm really kind of, I don't want to come across as being like non-supportive, but I'm really kind of against cancel culture because I feel like I feel like it kind of goes against what, they want to cancel people because they don't want that person to offend or hurt anybody. But yet, like, they're kind of like not giving that person a chance to make amends and turn themselves around. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
You can't make a mistake
Go ahead.
and never live it down. Like if somebody scrutinized my life and went back and looked at everything I've ever posted online or said in person and just dissected everything, and then like my life and my career and everything was based off that, I'm sure I'd be fucked. I mean, I know there's been times
we would all be canceled, 100%.
I mean, when you're younger, you say stuff that's not correct, not PC, not, and some of it's not even directed at somebody. Some of it's in casual conversation. And I feel like, again, not to give him an out, but the recordings of him making the statements he did that you spoke of, he's very obviously very intoxicated.
Yeah.
When he's saying these things.
For sure.
And he's going through a really nasty divorce.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like you really shouldn't, weigh in and sentence a person to, life in prison, essentially, or public prison, for something they said or did at like the lowest point of their life.
Sure. I agree.
It's really kind of hard to do that. I feel like, I don't know, I feel like that's probably one of the worst things that's come out of like the internet and social media and all the connectivity we have, is that you can never live anything down. Like you're stuck with
it. It's a difficult line to kind of strike a balance on because, I think there's kind of, and I could be wrong about this, but there's to me it seems that there's a sense of kind of like a one size fits all justice for anybody who's getting canceled online. Right. Regardless of what they did, and it's it often lacks context, and to your point, it lacks compassion for this person who may or may not have been at the lowest point of their life. But regardless of whether or not that's true, this person, even if they're quote unquote canceled, they're still going to be here. They're going to be alive. They have to live their lives, one way or another. And it's not one size fits all. It's one thing for somebody to say something truly hurtful and terrible, and I'm not condoning that whatsoever, like Mel Gibson did. But it's quite another thing to, do something much worse than that actually hurts, like physically harms somebody, or violates their privacy, or, something along those lines. And it does seem to me, and again, I could be wrong about this, and if I'm wrong, listeners, please feel free to correct me and roast me. I can handle it, that's fine. But it seems like that some people are quick to, dismiss everybody outright, grade them on the same curve, more or less, regardless of what they did wrong. And I just feel like there's more nuance and more context that needs to be established for that sort of thing.
I agree. And, just to echo your point, I think that the punishment needs to fit the crime. And, people get really outraged about, people using words, and they want to, cancel that person because they said something. They used the wrong word. They said the wrong thing. And, I feel like it's taking people who do something that's really wrong and really hurtful, say such and such celebrity was found to have, raped somebody, 10 years ago or 20 years ago, but they're getting this, but the person who made a joke that maybe was, racist a decade ago gets the same punishment. The punishment needs to fit the crime. And there comes a time where it's like, okay, well, maybe you can forgive that person, let them live it down. And I think to some extent, Mel Gibson has lived it down. His career's not probably where it could be had all that stuff not happened. But, he is making movies now, and he is doing things. I was going to bring this up, and this is kind of I'm going to segue into something else because I want to ask your opinion about it, and it's going to be totally off topic from what we're talking about. But
okay.
trying to think of how the best way to do this without sounding all jumbled together and weird. So I think that there's a lot of other people that get hurt, maybe unintentionally, when you treat somebody, where one size fits all. And I'm going to give you a really good example of this. Mel Gibson has a son who's an actor. I don't know if you're familiar with him. His name's Milo Gibson.
No.
I was actually going to ask you this. I thought of this earlier. I was going to ask you this. His career, by a lot of the sense, has kind of been hurt due to the fact that he's kind of got blacklisted because of his dad's past. Mm-hmm. I like him as an actor. He's done a couple of movies where he's kind of like his dad. He plays a tough guy. He's got a certain build about him. While we're sitting here right now, I want you to pull up a tab and Google him real quick. Let me know when you got a picture of him.
All right, I am Googling. I am looking. Okay.
Okay. Now, next to that, where you typed in Milo Gibson, type in space, type in Wolverine.
Okay.
And see if they do a side-by-side picture.
Yeah.
Tell me that guy wouldn't be a spot-on replacement to replace Hugh Jackman as Wolverine.
Yeah, I mean, he's got the look for sure. Yeah.
He's got the look. I've seen some of his movies. He's definitely got that brooding, tough guy persona. He's got the voice for it. He's even closer to the character's height and weight and everything in the comics. He's like 5'10", 5'9" or something like that. He's shorter. There's a lot of people who think he could be a front runner for the character. He's in his late 20s, early 30s. I think he'd be a great choice. But because of his dad, he's got probably a lot less chance than somebody who maybe doesn't fit the role. And this is what kind of sucks about, shoehorning the same type of punishment over everybody. It doesn't necessarily hurt just that person, and I kind of think that sucks, especially when your family and other people get drug under by that.
Yeah, it could be tough for some people to kind of separate, I guess, the actions of one person from the life of someone they're related to. I think it's easy for people to see, regardless of whether or not it's true, to see family members as complicit, in a way. I don't know if that's fair to say necessarily, but that's what it seems like sometimes.
Right.
But yeah, it's again, I want to give the guy the benefit of the doubt. Is he like a weird rich asshole? He might be. It's probably likely, really, but it seems like he's doing what he can to make amends for his past. And again, that's like what you want from, as like an outsider from that person. You want them to own up to their mistakes and demonstrate that this is what I'm doing to be a better person. And the problem is that so many people are quick to just dismiss them outright, even as they're trying to make amends and improve their own lives and be better people. And if that's how you feel and that's the way that you want to do that, that's okay. I understand. If someone came up to me and said oh, I won't watch Mel Gibson movies because I don't like what he said about Jewish people, I'd be like, I get it. I don't blame you. I don't blame you one bit. So, but again, it's like you said, the punishment I think has to fit the crime. And it seems that I don't want to say it was harsh. I mean, it was harsh and it should have been harsh, but if he's demonstrably making an effort to right the wrongs, then I think you have to be open to that. I think that's a good place to end it. So let's end it and say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
When you lose your love and it makes your life turn cold, when
and